Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Unlocking Potential Through Positive Psychology and Coaching. We're very glad to have you joining us today. We have the wonderful Professor Christian van Nieuwenburg, who's a professor at the School of Psychology at the University of East London. Before I pass you over to Christian, what I would like to do is just go through a bit of housekeeping. You should see on your GoToWebinar portals the option to chat with us. This presentation will be very asking for your participation at some point. So we do want you to pay attention and we would love for you to participate. I also encourage you at any point to ask a question in the chat box. At the very end of the presentation, what we'll do is we'll look through all the questions and I will pose those questions to Christian for him to answer. I also know that there, as international students, a few of you will have questions regarding the visa process or various other things pertaining to your particular circumstance. We do encourage you to email about that or to go through the agent portal with any questions, but today to really lean into the subject at hand regarding psychology, this is going to be a really interesting presentation. So if you ask any questions, do try and make them regarding this presentation and not to do with the visa process. That would be much appreciated. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Professor Christian. Thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you, Annabelle. And hi, everyone. Thanks for being on this webinar. I'm really excited. I first came to the United Kingdom as an international student myself, so it's wonderful to be talking to all of you. I'm talking about a topic that I'm really passionate about, and that is positive psychology and coaching. And just a little bit of personal background, which might be helpful. I was actually born in Beirut, Lebanon. I don't know if there's anybody on the call from Lebanon. It's a beautiful country. I was born there. My mother's Japanese. She's the person who brought me up. My father is Belgian, so that's my nationality. I have a Belgian nationality. Currently, I do a lot of work out in Australia. I spent quite a lot of the year out in Australia, and I live in the United Kingdom. So I just wanted to bring that kind of the international flavor of all of this. Anyway, so I hope there's some connections there, and I'd love for you to put in the chat if you are from any of those places. It would be lovely to know about that. So let me just start off by defining two of the key phrases that we're talking about today. First, the term coaching psychology. Now, I'm wondering whether you've heard about coaching. People talk about executive coaching or leadership coaching or even life coaching. This is different from sports coaching. Coaching psychology is really a way of helping people to set and achieve meaningful goals. It's been really popular in the United Kingdom and in the US as well, and in Europe since probably the 1990s. And the field of coaching psychology continues to flourish. And UEL, University of East London, we've been at the forefront of research into coaching psychology. And we were only the second university in the world to set up a master's in coaching psychology. And so you can see here my favorite definition, and I hope you're going to get excited about this as well. This is the quote that got me excited about coaching. And this is from somebody called Sir John Whitmore. The definition is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. So really important to highlight the whole coaching approach is based on the idea that in each one of us, there is enormous potential. And coaching is a way of helping, through conversation, other people to tap into that huge potential that they have. It's really important, when we teach about coaching psychology at the University of East London, this is a way of supporting people to achieve more of what they would like without telling them what to do. It's the opposite of teaching. Coaching is really about creating the environment in which people can grow and flourish. Another definition comes from Tony Grant, and it is that it's using theoretically grounded and scientifically validated techniques to help people to achieve goals in their lives. And really important to highlight that, to make it as simple as possible, coaching is about helping people to set a goal that excites them or that they're interested in achieving, and then support them to achieve that goal through small steps. That's how I would define coaching. I'm an executive coach myself. I've coached hundreds, if not thousands of people, and I'm always amazed at how resourceful people are. And simply having this kind of conversation can unlock that potential. Now, what about positive psychology? Now, some of you may have heard about positive psychology. It's been around since the year 2000. It's become hugely popular, both in the popular press. You can read lots of books about it, but there's been a huge amount of research into positive psychology as well. So positive psychology, it's the scientific study of optimal human functioning. And optimal is the key word here. It's not peak performance. It's not about getting people to perform at, as we often say, 110% or something like that. Positive psychology is about getting people to perform at their best in a way that's sustainable over time. So if you like, it's about helping people to achieve the most they can achieve whilst also supporting their well-being. Another definition, and these are from colleagues of ours at University of East London. Ilona Boniwell is a professor on the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology. Professor Annetta Tunari is the Dean of the School of Psychology. The definition is the study of what makes individuals and communities flourish rather than languish. So that's the focus of positive psychology. Positive psychology is looking at what's good about human beings. It wants to study human beings at their best. That's the focus of positive psychology. Now, at University of East London, we've been integrating the two, and what I want to do in the next few minutes is just explain to you why we're integrating the two things. And then I'm going to ask you for your views about something. I'm going to ask you a question. And then what I'd like to do is talk to you about how we might use some of the things we're learning from these two fields now during this current global pandemic. And I just want to share some insights from these fields that might be helpful to you personally during these times. So why do we argue for the integration of coaching psychology and positive psychology? Well, first of all, that idea that I've already mentioned of optimal performance. Both coaching and positive psychology are interested in helping people to achieve the best they can achieve, but whilst looking after their well-being. So it's really important because in a lot of Western societies, the idea that performance is probably more important than well-being, I think, is hugely problematic. And many of you will have been in schools until recently or university, and I think you can see it in many of our school systems as well. Sometimes the focus is very much on how can we achieve the grades that are needed and about pushing people to achieve those grades. And sometimes in trying to achieve those grades, there's a negative impact on our well-being. So both coaching and positive psychology are actually interested in how can we help people to achieve the most they can achieve in a way that's good for their well-being rather than damaging potentially. The other phrase, which comes from the coaching, the idea of unlocking potential. Both fields are interested in that. Coaching does it through the one-to-one conversations about how to tap into somebody's potential. Positive psychology is more interested in unlocking the potential in organizations, in societies, maybe even globally, and it has that focus. And finally, the most important one for me is that both fields should be interested in people's well-being, and both can be used to enhance subjective well-being. And subjective well-being is an academic term we're using now. You could translate that to happiness in some cases. And there's lots being written right now about happiness and books about happiness. The academic term is subjective well-being. And the reason we use the term subjective is it's quite difficult to measure concepts like happiness. How happy are you? So we like the idea that we're acknowledging that it is subjective. However, we're still interested in helping people to improve their own subjective well-being. So just to kind of summarize that part, we think positive psychology, it's a scientific field. It's looking at optimal functioning. Its main focus has been subjective well-being. Here we've got, on the other hand, we've got coaching psychology, which is a research-informed way of helping people to achieve goals. And by bringing those two together, we want to really have a positive impact on individuals and on society. So now a moment where I'm going to ask you a question, and Annabelle, if it's okay with you, Annabelle will pop in and share some of those comments, some of the answers with me. But I want to give you a moment to think. I love traveling. I travel a lot. I used to travel a lot as part of my work. First of all, if any of you can guess where this is, just type that into the chat box. There's a big clue there. But I took this photograph myself. I was in this place probably 4 or 5 months ago, doing something for University of East London, actually. I took that photograph. But the question I want to ask you is, what is it that makes your heart sing? And I really want you to think about that question. It maybe sounds like a strange question, but what is it in your life? What kind of activities do you do that make your heart sing? So take a moment, type down something if you would like to, that captures the things that, you know, for you make your heart sing. What are the things that are really meaningful in your life, in other words? So I'll give you a moment just to type those in. Annabelle, if anything appears in the chat box, could you let me know what it is? First of all, I'm curious about whether anybody knows where that is.
Hey, Christian, yes, we're getting quite a lot of responses, which is great. We have one student who thinks it's in Malaysia.
That's correct, Kuala Lumpur. Well done.
Awesome.
That's great, because those behind are the Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur, Petronas Towers, I think. But what about the things that make people's hearts sing? Have we got something there?
We have quite a few. So we have photography and music, community,
Oh, I love
traveling.
the community.
Yeah, community was one. We have traveling, exploring new cultures and learning new things.
Wonderful.
We also have meditation and
Yes.
challenging my strengths, for example, piano playing, reading.
Wonderful. Thank you, Annabelle. Thank you for sharing that. And I just wanted us to reflect on that. This idea, really the integration of coaching and positive psychology is about finding ways to help people spend more of their time doing the things that make their heart sing. And that's why I just wanted to bring it down to this. So it's coaching and positive psychology together remind us to do the things that are meaningful to us, to spend time in that. And, you know, I coach a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier. Some of them may be in the middle or towards the end of their careers. And many times I ask them this question, and they realize that their whole professional lives have been around something else. Maybe it's not the thing that makes their heart sing. And they realize that they haven't been investing that much time into the things that maybe are most important to them. So that was the reason I just wanted you to reflect on that. And so as you're going into university and thinking about the next steps after it, my reflection would be for you to think about how are you going to integrate this thing, the thing that makes your heart sing, into what it is you're going to do after university. And that's a primary concern about in the field of positive psychology. Somebody mentioned strengths. So if you're interested in your strengths, you can go and go to a website called VIA Character, VIA character.org. If you go to that website, you can do a free strengths assessment. It'll tell you what your top strengths are. And the research into positive psychology shows that people who use their strengths on a daily basis are more likely to have higher subjective well-being. So there's a research-informed reason why we should all be doing the things that we love doing. So it's a really core idea there. And of course, the reason we're integrating coaching is a way of helping people just to have that reflective space. Somebody talked about meditation. Meditation is really clearing your mind and creating space for you to think about things that might be meaningful. So coaching is a way of helping people to do more of the things that make their heart sing. So I hope that was kind of a useful way of connecting those two things. Look, there's many different models of well-being, but if you're interested after this webinar, and I hope you are, if you're interested in positive psychology and you haven't read this book already, Professor Martin Seligman at University of Pennsylvania, he's the person who really launched positive psychology. And I would really recommend this book. It's called Flourish. The subtitle is A Visionary New Understanding of Happiness and Well-Being. So if you're interested in positive psychology, that would be a great place to start. In this book, he talks about, he's done some research into what are the various things that we need as human beings in order to flourish. What are the components? Now, it's important to note that according to this theory, we need all of these things. It's not one or the other. So as you're listening to me explain these very briefly, maybe do a little self-check to say, do I have these all of these things covered? If you have, that's wonderful, and you should celebrate it. And if you're thinking, oh, I have some of them but not others, then of course the way to think about it is how can I increase one of these things in my life? And that's another example of how coaching can help. If somebody, for example, is low in engagement, they could work on that with a coach, or they can do it individually. But let me just tell you what the 6 elements are. First of all, according to this theory, in order for us to consider ourselves flourishing, living our best lives, if you like, we need to experience positive emotions. It's not to say we only have to have positive emotions, because it's normal to have the full range of emotions. We're human beings, we have all the range of emotions, but it's just a reminder that we need to be regularly having positive emotions as well. The engagement, what engagement refers to is, again, for people to say they're flourishing, they need to be fully engaged at something important that they do. So if they're professionals, it's very helpful if their work is engaging for them. If they're people who are not working, other activities that they do, they need to be fully engaging. So human beings, in order to flourish, have to be fully engaged in something important that they do. I hope the third one is going to sound a bit like common sense, but for us to flourish, really, we're very social animals, human beings. So we need to have positive relationships. So that's, we can talk about family, we can talk about friends, we can talk about work colleagues, but essentially, human beings, in order to flourish, have to have positive relationships in their lives. A very interesting one, the fourth one, meaning and purpose. It's very important, again, for human beings to have a sense for themselves about the meaning. What is it all about? So that they need to have some understanding of that. And that could be a faith. It doesn't have to be. It could be a faith. It could be a philosophy. And also very important that people have a sense of purpose. So that if you imagine you ask somebody, tell me what is your purpose? What is it you're here to do? What are you doing here? That sense of purpose is key. So that's a fourth area. The fifth one, very interesting, and quite a lot of psychology research does point to this one. We need to feel we're accomplishing things. Human beings need to feel that we're taking steps in a positive direction. So that sense of I'm getting things done, I'm achieving things, I'm being successful at things, that's very important for us as human beings as well. And although this fifth one wasn't in the original book, Flourish, Martin Seligman added it later. He realized he'd missed it out because he was thinking, I think he was being mostly psychological. But of course, in order for us to flourish, we need a degree of physical health. And so just a reminder that we need to look after ourselves, our own physical health while attending to all of these things. So remember, this is one theory about well-being. There's quite a few others, but I think it's helpful to see things in this way. And as a reminder, what we're saying is that in order for human beings to flourish, they need to have all 6 of these things. And the way we would approach it from a coaching point of view is talk to somebody and say, right, how are you doing in all of these areas? Where are you doing very well? Where do you think you'd like to do a little bit better? And then if they pick one that they'd like to be a little bit better at, we would have a conversation. And the conversation would be something like, okay, what sort of things can you do to increase engagement? What sort of things do you enjoy doing? How can you spend more time doing those things? So that's the well-being framework that I wanted to share. And finally, because recognizing we're all now, for the first time in a long time, as human beings, we're facing a common challenge, which is this pandemic, which means that I'm working from home, and I have been working from home for about 7-8 weeks now. So I just wanted to share some insights using this framework, things that are easy for us to do, that'll help to make sure that we look after our own well-being while during this challenging time. So I hope that's appropriate. So very simply, first of all, make sure that you find time for the things that you enjoy, and make sure they're regular. Either every day, make sure there's a little bit of time for doing something purely out of enjoyment, or maybe it's weekly, or maybe it's monthly. But very important for us to remember, there's a lot of terrible things going on at the moment. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of anxiety out there. But even within that, remember that we need to do things. And the reason we want to do this is to increase our positive emotions, if you remember. Secondly, get immersed in what it is you do. If you're a learner, really get into that. If you're a professional, get into that. If you're somebody who looks after the family, really get immersed in that role. And the reason we're saying this is because we know that engagement is a really important part of our well-being. So whatever it is that you are doing, if it's kind of become a little bit mundane, if it's become a little bit, it's the same thing every day, find a way to reconnect with it and really get into it. Think about, how can I do this the best that I can possibly do? Third point, and in the United Kingdom, we've been having this situation called social distancing. In fact, it's physical distancing. We have to stay away from other people, 2 meters away from others. Many people aren't seeing their family members, but even there, remember to invest in those relationships. Spend time connecting with people, even by email, using Skype. Find time to build those relationships, because again, we know that our well-being is affected by us having positive relationships. This meaning and purpose thing, some people have told me that one positive thing out of the current pandemic is people are realizing what's really important for them. This has been almost like we've all taken a bit of a pause. We've stopped what it is we were doing. We got out of the busy routine. And some people are kind of thinking, gosh, I'd lost sight of what's really important. And now I realize this is what's important. So when I was coaching somebody recently, one of the things I asked is, what are the things that you used to do before this pandemic that you're committed to continue doing? What are the things that you used to do before this pandemic? Now do you realize, actually, maybe I don't need to do that anymore? And what are the new things you want to do once this pandemic has passed? So I think now might be a good moment for us to do that self-assessment. What is really important for me? What do I really want to achieve? What are the key things that I really want to spend the most time on? So a great moment for us to be doing that right now, I think. Again, celebrate achievements, remember, because we need that sense of accomplishment. And these are little things. I'm in a constant battle with my emails. I get quite a few emails every day, and it's constantly trying to work my way through those emails. But when I get through them, I do have a little reward. I'm not saying I go out and buy myself a bar of chocolate or something, but a little thing like, once I get through my emails, I'm going to have a little walk in the garden, or I'm going to have a cup of espresso. It's partially celebrating it, but it's acknowledging that I've achieved something that I wanted to achieve. And that is important for our sense of well-being. And if we do believe that we're achieving important things, we're going to be flourishing. And finally, very importantly, stay healthy. And by the way, these little photographs, they're tiny, aren't they? But these are all photographs I've taken myself in different places. The second one down, get immersed in what you do, that was taken in Peru recently when I had a chance to go and swim with some sea lions and seals. The one underneath, invest in relationships, a tiny one again, that was in South Africa. I think the celebrate achievements, that was in the Canary Islands, a beautiful place. And stay healthy, that's just a few minutes walk from where I live. I live in Warwickshire, in the beautiful English countryside, and it's been lambing season, which means there's a few lambs that have just born. So, but the idea of stay healthy, and part of that, if it's permissible where you are now, is to make sure you go out for walks or get as much exercise as possible. It's also looking after our diet. Often when we're under stress, we tend to go to our comfort foods and maybe eat more than we normally would. So it's just being aware of those things, because our physical health, of course, is an important part of our overall well-being. So that gets us to the questions part, where I'm very keen to hear questions. As Annabelle said, please don't ask me questions about visas, because I can't answer those questions. But any questions related to coaching or positive psychology, or what it's like to come to UEL, I think UEL is a wonderful institution, hugely diverse, a great mixing place where lots of energy and new ideas take place. So I recommend it, but of course I work here. Annabelle?
Thank you so much, Christian. That was a really insightful presentation. And we're just waiting for a few more questions to come in. But for now, we've had one regarding personality tests. Christian,
Yeah.
there are a lot of personality tests on the web. I know Myers-Briggs is one. What would you say about these personality tests? Are they a good indicator of your strengths? And can people use that as a basis to learn about what they need to work on?
Look, this is a wonderful question. So I'll give you the short answer, but I have a little bit more to say, and maybe that'll give you time to type some more questions in. So the short answer is, I think they're very useful as long as we're aware what they are. A lot of these psychometric tests are based on the information that you give. So they're self-report measures. So you answer certain questions, and based on those questions, they give you a response. And through psychology, we know that there is such a thing as individual differences. So as human beings, there are different personality types, and there's differences between us as people. So I find them very helpful as a way of building self-awareness. However, please make sure that if you take these, you don't take it as a fact. That if it tells you something about your personality and you say, that's right, it has to be that. Sometimes the questionnaires can be wrong. Sometimes you might have answered it differently on a different day. So I find them very useful as one source of information. And of course, I'm going to say this, but I think that once you've done a questionnaire like that and you've got your results, it's very useful to talk to somebody else about it and just chat things through. And now what's most interesting with any of these results is, firstly, what are the things that you really connect with and you're thinking, yeah, that's exactly right, that's perfect, that's exactly me. That does give you a good indication that those are probably things that are relatively accurate. But the other thing to look at is the bits that you're not so sure about, and coming with a view of curiosity to those, to say, oh, okay, I didn't think that. And then remember, it could be wrong, or it could be an area where you can develop your own self-awareness. So I find those very useful. And the time at university, you're going to learn so much at university about the subject that you've applied for. There's no doubt about that. But it's also a huge time of learning about ourselves. So again, for that reason, I do recommend, do the Myers-Briggs, do questionnaires online, do questionnaires about mental toughness or resilience, just so that you get to know yourself better, because that's an important part of your learning journey at university, is getting to learn about yourself as well.
Fantastic, Christian. Thanks so much. And we've had another question in regards to when students look to grow, grow and actively work on the points that you mentioned, like invest in relationships and so forth. Is it easy to do that yourself, or would you recommend people find someone that can keep them accountable?
Yeah, this is another great question. So we've got a great bunch of students coming, Annabelle, so that's good news for us. So
Definitely.
I would say coaching is all, as a coach, I think it's my role to make myself redundant. In other words, I don't want to be a long-term support for my clients. So I think initially, if you're getting yourself sorted out and you're thinking, I really want to have a look at my well-being, I want to really think about this, it actually is helpful to talk to somebody else who is interested. They don't have to be a coach. They have to be somebody else who's interested in you and your development. So it could be a friend, it could be a family member, but it is important that they don't interfere, if you like. So it would be useful to have a conversation with somebody else who'll just listen to you think out loud almost. And therefore, it is helpful at some point to have somebody to work with. But this person's absolutely right. Longer term, it's very important that this is something that is self-managed and is driven through self-motivation rather than you're doing it for someone else. So that's a really delicate balance, and it's well spotted and well mentioned.
Thanks very much, Christian. We've also had some questions regarding people wanting to know a little bit more about the background of coaching. So we've had a question come in, which is, what are some of the common challenges that coaches face during one-on-one conversations with clients?
Oh, thank you for these questions. It's almost like I wrote them myself, Annabelle. It's things I'd like to talk about. So I think there's a lot of positives that come out of coaching. Coaching can lead to transformational conversations, but there are times when there's challenging conversations, and I'll give you a few examples. Probably the most challenging is if the person being coached doesn't want to be coached. And it's very challenging because for me, coaching is a respectful conversation, and the principle of choice is critical. So I would say nobody should be coached if they don't want to be coached. On the flip side, if a person wants to be coached, if they want to make improvements, if they want to move forward to a particular goal, then you can see already that it's going to be a very fruitful conversation. So that can be a big challenge. And so when I do work with organizations, I've worked with organizations in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in the US, in the Middle East. If they're rolling out coaching programs, I put that as a key fundamental point, is that it should be voluntary. So people must want to be coached in order to get the benefits of this approach. Other challenges that can happen is, coaching is they're confidential conversations and they can feel very intimate. What I mean by that, there's just two people in the room. There's a high level of trust. There's confidentiality. So one of the other challenges is that people can sometimes bring their emotions into these conversations, which is absolutely normal because we're human beings and we have emotions. And for some reason, again, in the West, we've seemed to have made it a policy that you're not allowed to bring your emotions to work. So often strong emotions do come up in coaching. Now, I don't know whether that's a challenge, because I think it's a good thing, but some coaches find that challenging because, people have a realization and they might be very sad about something at certain points in the conversation. And so that would be a challenge. Other big challenges that exist are to do with intercultural sensitivity. And I've done some research into this. I've done some writing into it as well. And what other challenges can happen when there's not enough mutual respect between the coach and the coachee. So it's very important that wherever the coaching is taking place, there's respect for the coachee, their culture, their lifestyle, everything about them. So another challenge could be that coaching is sometimes perceived as a way of promoting a particular way of thinking, and it shouldn't be that at all. So that would be another challenge. Final challenge, maybe there's too many challenges now, but a final challenge with coaching is that it's not a regulated profession. So you don't need to be a professional, to have a professional accreditation to call yourself a coach. So one of the other challenges is that there's a lot of people out there saying, hey, I'm a coach. And one of the things we do at University of East London is we have our master's program. It's a university degree, it's a postgraduate degree, it's accredited by the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. So maybe there's another challenge around the professionalism of coaches globally.
That's great. Thank you so much. And we've had another question come in, which is, what is the newest innovation or fastest area of positive psychology that is growing or you think needs more research?
Oh, brilliant question. Another amazing question. Are you sure you're not writing these, Annabelle? They're great.
We have great attendees on the line.
Thank you, attendees. And I'm a coach, and what I love more than anything is questions. So I just love receiving questions like this. Now this is something you can check, and it's going to sound like I'm just championing University of East London, but actually University of East London, we are at the cutting edge of the integration between coaching and positive psychology. So that's the area where more research is needed. Exactly the topic of this webinar, the idea of integration. It's led to something called positive psychology coaching. Only a couple of weeks ago at UEL, we gave a free webinar around positive psychology coaching. I did a conversation with a colleague of mine in the United States. His name's Robert Biswas-Diener. They call him the Indiana Jones of coaching. He and I had a webinar about this topic, and we were expecting 100, 200 people on the webinar. 1,700 people registered for that webinar. University of East London, we're the only university in the world that have this integrated degree called Masters of Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology. Now, it was what area needs research was the question. The area that we're working on now is an intervention or an approach called positive psychology coaching. And we're right now, we are at University of East London involved in a project, a research project, which is we're giving positive psychology coaching to professionals who are working from home because of the pandemic. And the topic of the positive psychology coaching is how to best manage the process of working from home, because a lot of people aren't used to working from home, and if they are used to working from home, they're not used to working with their family around. So there's additional kind of things that need to be thought about in relation to working from home. Why are we doing positive psychology coaching? Because it looks at performance. So on the one hand, how can I do better working from home performance-wise? But remember, we're also interested in well-being, and we'll also be talking to clients about, and what are you doing to look after your well-being during this time and the well-being of those around you? So that is cutting edge stuff. That research is just being done right now. You know, it's going to be fast-tracked, this research, because it's related to COVID-19. So hopefully that research will be out end of this year. A lot of the research of our master students on this, what we call the MAPCP, a lot of it is published. I would say maybe 30, 40 dissertations are actually published in peer-reviewed academic journals every year. And the reason for that is because this is such a new field. We're really at the cutting edge of learning about it. But let me give you another answer to that. Another interesting development in positive psychology is what's called positive psychology 2.0, or second wave positive psychology. And that is recognizing that positive psychology isn't only about positive emotions. So it's the idea that, you know, those emotions that we might normally think of as negative, such as sadness or anger or frustration, the point is they aren't negative emotions. They are positive as well, because we're human beings. We have a whole range of emotions, and those emotions can lead to positive outcomes. And this idea of second wave positive psychology, or positive psychology 2.0, a lot of the work around that has also emerged from University of East London. So it's a very exciting area. And, you know, at UEL, University of East London, we came first for impact in terms of the research we had within the School of Psychology. But we're also, one of the great things about UEL is we're very focused on impact. We're very interested on learning something and saying, well, what do we do with this learning? Putting it into practice. Thanks, Annabelle. And by the way, for everybody out there, that's a logo that I drew myself. So I just wanted to give you a bit of my artistic talents as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christian. And then we have another question which has come in regarding, is there any further reading that you would suggest for students? I know you mentioned that book, but is there any other books that you would particularly recommend?
Yes, definitely. And thank you for asking that question as well. So first of all, if you Google positive psychology and Martin Seligman, there's a great YouTube clip of him talking. I think he's actually talking to Google executives. So Google positive psychology and Martin Seligman, and you'll see a video of him talking about what positive psychology is all about. The other book I would recommend is from my colleague, Ilona Boniwell. It's called Positive Psychology in a Nutshell, the 3rd edition. And that's a very accessible first book into positive psychology, just to figure out if it's something you like. And with my apologies, I've written a book as well. It's called An Introduction to Coaching Skills, a Practical Guide. And so if you're interested in coaching, of course, I'm going to recommend that. But it is a bestseller within the coaching field. It's used to teach coaching in many different organizations around the world. So that might be an interesting book as well. And, you know, I really think now is a good time for you to be thinking about positive psychology and coaching, even if you don't study the topic, just to be aware of those things while you're working. Actually, one book project I'm working on, it won't be out for another 18 months, is called From Surviving to Thriving, a university student's guide to coaching and positive psychology. So hopefully that book will be out probably 18 months from now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then we've had a lot of questions come in regarding the Masters of Psychology, particularly a lot of students curious to know exactly what projects they'll get to work on and what range of careers have alumni gone on to do.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So if people are asking about the Masters in Psychology, we have a conversion course. It was one of the first, which means that if you have undergraduate degree in another subject and you would like to transfer to psychology, we call that the Masters in Psychology. I've done that course myself. I did the conversion course at University of East London, so it's highly recommended. It gives you a broad overview of the field of psychology, and pretty much in 1 year, you would cover what undergraduates spend 3 years doing. So there's that Masters in Psychology. Of course, I recommend it. I took it. I think it's valuable. You choose you choose your own research topic at the end of that program. And, you know, I did a research topic on that master's, and it's published and it's available. You can probably see it out there. It's called something like the Positive Life Experiences of Students on a MAP program, Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program. That was my master's dissertation. If people are interested in the Masters in Coaching and Positive Psychology, the one that I teach on, and what do people do afterwards, the great thing is there isn't a fixed answer to that. There's not one or two different things that people do. Many people come in as educators and then go back into that field, or come in as leaders and go back into that. But it's most suited for people in organizational development roles, human resource roles, educational roles, leadership roles. So all of the content of the Masters in Coaching and Positive Psychology is widely applicable. And what we like to say on our program is that we're training people to know about human beings and change. That's what people are learning about. And we want people to be equipped to go and work with individuals, with organizations, with societies, with governments, about bringing about positive change. So that's probably what the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology and Coaching Psychology covers. But we have a broad range of really excellent postgraduate and undergraduate programs at UEL. So I hope you find the one that's right for you and get the benefits from that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that's all the questions we had in. I can definitely say that I'm sure the attendees absolutely loved it. I found that absolutely fascinating. So thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. And I would highly encourage all of our attendees on the line. This whole week is dedicated to psychology. So on Friday, we have a masterclass on how does cognitive behavioral therapy change the brain, which will be led by one of our lecturers, Cynthia Fu. So if you're interested in that, please join us on Friday for that. And we hope that you also join us for the remainder of the webinar series, which will be carrying on for a couple of months, and we'll look at a variety of different topics. But for now, it's goodbye from Christian and I, and we hope you have a really lovely day ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.